Your pals, smart talk, real fast. This is your hour.
Welcome to a new episode of Justice. I'm your host, attorney at law, Janice St. Romain, and this is the show where we talk about knowing your rights and knowing your power. This week, we're diving into one of the laws that governs employment for thousands of workers across Antigua and Barbuda, the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code, Cap 27. This comprehensive piece of legislation sets out basic rights and obligations for both employees and employers from hiring to termination. And our labor code, which was enacted in 1975, stands on the shoulders of a very powerful history. In 1939, amid colonial hardships and economic exploitation, the Antigua Trades and Labor Union, the ATNLU, was founded by workers, and it was one of the first major trade unions here in Antigua and Barbuda. It was led by a number of visionaries, including the father of our nation, Sir Vere Cornwall Bird, who became its president in 1943. The union would have fought for better wages, fair conditions, and an end to child labor. Notably, it was ATNLU's activism which would have contributed to Antigua's transition from a British colony to an associated state in 1967, and then eventually to full independence in 1981. So in 1967, we also had the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union, the ABWU, which also emerged, adding another strong voice for workers. So the labor code that we're discussing tonight is one that is the result of that legacy. It codifies a number of protections that promote fair employment, and it aligns with a number of international standards that have been set by the International Labour Organization. We also have an industrial court here in Antigua and Barbuda that manages labor disputes. That court was established by the Industrial Court Act, enacted in 1976, and up to present day, Antigua and Barbuda has had the emergence of a number of trade unions. So given the breadth and the length of our code, tonight we're going to be focusing on the topics that viewers have indicated the most interest in. We're going to try to get through it all, but we'll be looking at hiring and employment contracts. We'll be looking at statutory minimums like wages, hours. We'll also be talking a bit about leave entitlements, vacation, sick leave, maternity and paternity. And then we'll also be talking about termination, including unfair dismissal and redundancy. So I'm thrilled to be joined tonight in studio by two gentlemen with extensive experience in industrial relations. We have Mr. Pascal Kentush joining us in studio tonight. He is the Deputy Labor Commissioner at the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Department, and he brings invaluable insight into the administration and the enforcement of the Labor Code. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Good night.
We're also joined this evening by Mr. Anderson Carty, who is a management consultant who specializes in human resources, industrial relations, business development, and financial management. He's been in the business of human resource management and industrial relations for over 33 years. He continues to represent the largest plethora of employer-employee clientele in labor relations and in industrial matters at the shop floor level, the Labor Department, and at the Industrial Court. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Carty. Actually, thank you both for joining me this evening. Welcome to Justice.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So, Mr. Kentish, this evening, our conversation is starting with you at the basics. Can you explain to the viewers this evening the purpose of the Labor Code and who it applies to?
Okay, so thank you and good night to you and your viewers. Let me start off first with the Labor Department, because the Labor Department is that entity that I am representing here tonight. And so the Labor Department is that entity that is engaged in labor administration. You mentioned the International Labour Organization in your intro. And there is a convention, the Labor Administration Convention, that says that governments ought to establish a mechanism for workers and employers to resolve their differences free of cost. And so that's the duty of the Labor Department, one of the duties of the Labor Department, to assist workers and employers in resolving their differences. And as you stated, the Labor Department administers the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code. And so the Labor Code at Section A2 says that its purpose is to bring all employment standards, and industrial relations legislation together. Also, to provide a quick means for employers and employees to get information about their rights and responsibilities, and also for investors to have a ready-to-hand document that they will know their rights and responsibilities and also their employees' rights and responsibilities. And finally, it has, with all the legislation in one place, most of them, not all, but most of them in one place, it will make it easy for amendments to be done to the Labor Code. So those are the basic purpose of the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kentish. And thank you for also framing the role of the Labor Department in that explanation as well. Building on that, I'd actually like us to then move towards the hiring process. And for that, we're going to be turning to you, Mr. Kati. So we're asking so that the viewers know, what does the Labor Code require for employment contracts and for the hiring process? What is outlined in the Labor Code?
All right, thank you. And let me just say good evening to your listening and viewing audiences in Antigua, the Caribbean, and wherever else persons are listening to this very important program. And let me commend you for this program. It's certainly a lesson that a lot of persons are appreciative of from the responses that I have received. And as a young attorney, it's good to see that you have an interest in labor relations and employment law. As from my observation, a lot of the younger attorneys are not particularly keen to engage, in labor relations or employment law, as we would say. But just to get to the question, or to answer the question, the Labor Code, and I like to actually read sections of it as I refer to or answer the question. And so we have what one would call open-ended employment. You also have fixed-term contracts, which means it's an employment contract that has a start date and an end date. Open-ended employment contracts do not have any closing date. And a person can work right up to the age of retirement, or if they choose to resign, or if they give the employer cause to dismiss them. But what the law says, and I want to start by saying the law defines what an employee is. And I think that is the starting point. Because there are a lot of employers who come into the market, many of them from different jurisdictions, who come into Antigua and Barbuda, hire an employee on what they call, or what they refer to as independent contracts, or as independent contractors. And that has created a lot of problems for us here in Antigua and Barbuda. So the starting point has to be, when you come to our jurisdiction, even some of the local employees are guilty of engaging in that practice as well. You look at what our law says about an employee. And the definition of an employee, if we may find that, I believe in A3. Mr. Kentish, you can assist me if you are quicker to find it.
Love that everybody's turning to their Labor Code.
Yes, so we want to turn to the Labor Code because it is fundamental for us to understand. Yes, so it is section A5 rather, for those who have your Labor Code. And the starting point is, an employee means any person who enters into or works under or stands ready to enter into or work under a contract with an employer personally to perform any services or labor, whether the contract be oral or written, expressed or implied, and the term includes a person whose services or labor have been interrupted by a suspension of work during a period of leave, maternity leave, for example, vacation leave, a temporary layoff, a strike, a lockout, as well as an apprentice whose services or labor may be designed primarily to train such apprentice, but the term does not include established employees of the government, being civil servants that's there. So as long as you hire somebody to carry out work, to perform services or labor in exchange for wages, that person is an employee. And so therefore, you are duty bound to treat that person as an employee, and the reference is now made to the first requirement of hiring. And so we move now to section C5 of the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code that sets out statement of working condition. Now this is mandatory, this is a must. If you fail, you do so at your own peril as an employer. And so it says, every person who employs another shall, it doesn't say may, but if, maybe, it says shall, and it gives a time frame within 10 days of such employment, furnish said employee with a written statement which shall set forth A, the general responsibilities and related duties for which the employee is being employed, the regular hours of work and rest periods, the starting pay and method of computing same, the term of employment, if other than indefinite, the probation period, if any. And I want to stop there because there are individuals who believes that probation is automatic. You hire somebody and you don't give them a statement of employment, and then you fire them and say that they're on probation. You will not win your case. You must outline it because probation is not an automatic requirement of the law. And that's why the law says, if any. I go on. The employee's leave and vacation privileges and his obligation, if any, imposed on the section J13. J13 speaks about union. If the workers are unionized, then you must advise them of a collective bargaining agreement in place and provide them with a copy, or alternatively, have a copy available at a place that is inconspicuous where they can go and have access to it, so they know what are these benefits, terms and conditions that are incorporated under the employment contract. So these are the requirements for every employer who hires an employee to perform service in exchange for wages.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Mr. Kent, if you want to
Mr.
jump in.
Carty, Mr. Carty mentioned government's established employees that the code does not apply to. But there are some others. So you have the police, you have the military, and in 2017, the Office of National Drug and Money Laundering Control Policy was added to that list. Then it goes on to talk about diplomatic agents and persons working for the United Nations and the specialized agencies. Also included in that is independent contractors. Mr. Carty mentioned independent contractors. And it's a fact that a number of employers are hiring individuals and they're telling them that they're independent contractors. And when you look at the job description and the duties and responsibilities, they're not independent contractors. They're employees. And so people walk into the department from time to time and we look at it, or we would have received a contract and big and bold, in the contract is that you're an independent contractor. But when you really examine the relationship, it's not really one of independent contractor. Also, the courts have helped us, and the courts have laid down some rules, some things that you need to look at when you're examining the relationship to determine whether it's an employer-employee relationship or an employer-independent contractor relationship.
And what are some of those things? Since you've opened that Pandora's box for us, perhaps
So-
you gentlemen can just give us a brief overview.
So you look at the control. How much does the employer controls what that employee does? You look at deductions. You look at the implements of trade. Who is providing the things that
They're going to use.
the employee, that individual is going to use to do their work? One celebrated case was a matter involving West Indies with a cleaner. And they terminated her on the basis that she was an independent contractor. And she took them to the ringers, department, court. And the court looked at the relationship, and all the cleaning stuff, broom, mops, and cleaning solutions were provided by the employer. So how could she have been an independent contractor? Right? And not all job functions can be an independent contractor-employer relationship. So that's a warning we like to send out to employers. Be very careful when you're hiring individuals and what position, what status you want them to be in the organization.
And Mr. Kazi, I
A couple of
see.
essentials to add to that. You hire a cleaner and you say that the cleaner is an independent contractor and you're paying that cleaner minimum wage. Who would want to be in business for themselves as an independent contractor, as I am, and receive $300 and $400 to ply my trade, so to speak? And so that is something to be looked at. Another thing to look at as well is the job for which I am hired, can it be said to be accessory to the employer's business, or is it integrated into the business? And that is also something that is very critical to look at. But the employer already has a challenge, because in most cases, they do not supply a contract, whether written or this would be an oral contract, but they do not provide a contractual statement of some sort that the individual will be asked to sign to say that I'm in agreement here. Some provide a statement that says the contractor they are determining for the contractor that they will pay their statutory deductions, they will do this and they do that. If I am going to be if I am an independent contractor, I have equal bargaining rights when we are talking about the contract. And I'm going to call my fees. I'm going to say what. So there must be some measure of negotiations that happen between yourself and the client. So a lot of times it's the guys that the employers create in order to avoid having to pay benefits and pay taxes on behalf of the employee. And so it is very easy to unveil the relationship when you look at how it actually works.
How it
And
operates.
so we discourage employers.
Because a contractor doesn't get a salary.
There you go.
A contractor gets
A fee.
And I've seen contracts talking about
Wages and salary.
salary and this and that and so on. A contractor doesn't get a salary. A contractor gets his fees.
For the
A
services
contractor
rendered.
doesn't get vacation.
No.
If he wants off, then he would tell his employer that I'm going to be off. But ought to make himself available so that he can carry out his contract.
And get to set his or her hours
Hours of
of
work.
work as well.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
the control mechanism.
control factor.
I tell you when to come, I tell you when to go. When you're a contractor, you just make the place available for the individual to work. And once that happens, I come and do my work, sometimes I don't even see me, but you see the work done. right? And so people need to understand that there's a big difference between an independent contractor and an employee. And I think the quicker they understand that, the better most of our lives would be, especially us at the Labor Department.
Thank you, gentlemen. Very important reminders there for both workers, for employers, for independent contractors. So viewers, if you are somebody who would have recently started employment, and that was not the process, you would have heard what Mr. Kati outlined that you went through. That is something to consider perhaps raising with your employer or making a visit down to the Labor Department.
Last thing I done,
Go ahead.
consultants. They call them consultants and say that they're employees. A consultant is an independent contractor.
That's another way that person's trying to veil the relationship.
Yeah. And some of them, they really don't want to meet the statutory obligation, some employers. So that's why they hire individuals and say that they're independent contractors and consultants.
Even in HR departments now, you are having an HR consultant purporting to be acting as an HR manager and taking independent decisions against employees. That is inconsistent with our law and our good industrial relation practices. An HR consultant like myself, I cannot write a letter to any of my clients' employees warning them or threatening dismissal. Ought not to under law and our good. But it is happening, which is another thing that the Labor Department and of course practitioners like myself would have to address out there publicly so that these employers know that this is not the way to go. And it is all being done to evade, in most cases, taxes, having to pay the statutory taxes or the liabilities for employees that you hire, you see? And so that is something that has to be addressed moving forward.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Something very important to note. Now, we want to move on. As you've mentioned, there are statutory minimums. Sometimes they're trying to avoid those. I'd actually like to talk a bit more about those statutory minimums. So for somebody who has been hired, we just went through the hiring process, somebody who's working, Mr. Kentish, I'm coming back over to you. What are some of those statutory minimums that our labor code guarantees for those persons? What sort of rights do persons have as an employee as a result of the labor code?
So the first thing is what you're going to remunerate that individual on. And so what we have is a minimum wage. At present, it's $9 an hour. Scheduled to increase sometime soon.
The discussion's ongoing.
It is due. It is due. I think it's supposed to be reviewed every 2 years, right? So the last revision was, I think, 2023. So it's due for revision. It is being so it is being looked at the moment. Then, as an employee, you will earn vacation, right? And the minimum you will earn in a 12-month period is 12 days. You're also entitled to full pay for sick leave, 12 days, a minimum of 12 days. Now, that is, how to put it, a ticklish one, because people keep applying it incorrectly. So there are employers who you call in sick, because you can call in sick without a medical certificate for 2 consecutive days, a maximum of 2 consecutive days. But upon the 3rd day, you must present a medical certificate, or soon thereafter. And why I say that soon thereafter, there are times when people are hospitalized.
And so they're physically unable.
No, but the hospital on some occasions, most occasions, don't present you with a medical certificate until they have finished doing tests, so that they can put on that form what the illness is, not directly but the code for the illness. Right? So sometimes when you're being discharged from the hospital or being in the hospital for a few days, you're getting that medical certificate. So that's why I say soon thereafter. So The 12 days now, some people will say they will pay you if you call in sick, your full pay. But if you present a medical certificate, then they will pay you 40% because Social Security is going to pay you 60%. But you still have portions of those 12 days available to you. The law did not differentiate between certified or uncertified leave because those days that you are able to call in sick, those are called uncertified. And those that you present the medical certificate for, those are called certified sick leave. And so once you go on sick leave, whether you call in or you present a medical certificate, and you have portions of those 12 days available, you're entitled to your full pay. When you would have used up those 12 days, now it's up to the employer as to whether they wish to pay you for any more sick days. But if the employee presents a medical certificate, then that medical certificate ought to be completed and submitted to Social Security so that the employee can receive his sickness benefit from Social Security. Continuing, you have maternity leave. So female employees are entitled to maternity leave. It's now 14 weeks at 40% for the 14 weeks. The other 60% employees will get from Social Security, right? What some people try to do is to, especially for sick leave, tie Social Security to labor. But there's no correlation between the Social Security Act and the Labor Code when it comes to sick leave and maternity leave. There's no cross-referencing of both legislation at all. They operate independent of each other, right?
Important to note. And what about some of the standard for what the working day, minimum for a working day?
So the maximum work day is 8 hours. As it stands now, the maximum work week is 48 hours. And so that is 6 days at 8 hours. Because what the law says is that in any period of 7 consecutive days, you must get at least 24 hours rest. Then you have public holiday pay. So once you work on a public holiday, you're entitled to your normal day's pay plus time and a half for the number of hours you work on that day. And if you don't work on the public holiday, once you work a scheduled day before and you schedule day after the public holiday, you become entitled to that day's pay. Now, what some smart employers try to do is to tell you, so Thursday is a public holiday. They tell you, don't work on Wednesday, thinking that that will absolve them from paying for the public holiday because they did not work the day before. But the law says your scheduled work day. Who scheduled an employee to work? The employer. So if the employer scheduled me to work the Tuesday and not the Wednesday, and the Thursday is a public holiday, and I work the Friday, I become entitled to that day's pay. So hint, hint, that's another warning to employers. Don't try that.
The Labor Department is watching.
Right? Also, and this, I want to mention this one. A safe and healthy working environment. An employer has an obligation to provide a safe and healthy working environment. And according to the, again you mentioned it in your intro, the International Labour Organization and Convention C155, an employee has the right to remove him or herself from an environment that they think is dangerous to their health and safety. Right? we have not done the necessary really to have that convention fully implemented, but it's something that we must do because health and safety are our fundamental principle and right at work. And so that is basically the, what do you call it? The areas where you must, like the human rights of employees, when an area is declared a fundamental right and principle. And here it says fundamental rights and principle. So you know that that has, those areas have a lot of weight in respect to employees in the workplace.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kentish. And those are really baseline protections. So there are many workplaces, particularly through perhaps collective agreements or, as we would have mentioned, employment contracts that may actually provide more generous benefits than some of the minimums that you would have heard Mr. Kentish indicated are required by law. And that might actually be so for leave as well. You touched a bit on leave. And so shifting to talk more about leave at this time, I'm going to you, Mr. Kati. In the context of employment and in the context of labor law, leave refers to paid or unpaid time off of work that employees are entitled to under specific circumstances. So it protects the workers' rights to rest, or to recover from illness, or to handle their personal matters without losing their job or, in some cases, their pay. So the Labor Code outlines several types of leave entitlements, starting from Section C13 onwards, which would apply to most employees after passing a probation period, if any. That would have been mentioned before. Now, Mr. Kati is going to walk us through those main leave entitlements as soon as we get back from our break. We're going to be taking a break at this time. But before we do, I'd like to give a very quick shout out to Size and Style Boutique. They're located on Mahogany Drive, Gambles Court, across from Inland Revenue overlooking the pond. And they styled my outfit this evening, this lovely dress that I'm wearing. So you can find them on Instagram at Size and Style Boutique 268 or on Facebook at Size and Style Boutique. Thank you for supporting Justice Size and Style. When we return, we'll be talking a bit about leave. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Justice.
Reporting live from Caribbean Union Bank's press conference, where bank representatives will address its customers and the media, explaining just how CUB simplifies life through its financing.
Today, my team and I will share with you how CUB's financial solutions are designed to simplify your life. Now, let's open the floor for any questions that you may have.
How can you help me as a retired?
That's a good question. We offer customized retirement solutions at competitive rates.
How easy is it for me to switch my mortgage to CUB?
With attractive interest rates and minimal switching fees, CUB makes switching mortgages easy.
Do you offer point of sale machines?
Absolutely. All point of sale systems can speed up checkout and boost sales.
Those were great questions, and our team is here to further support you. We're Caribbean Union Bank, the bank that cares, and our doors are open to welcome you.
Put! Where's the car?
Don't stress when your getaway car gets away. Have peace of mind with CG United Comprehensive Motor Insurance.
CG United, good like that.
Justice. Justice.
Welcome back to Justice, where we're all about knowing your rights and knowing your power. Tonight, we're talking about employment and the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code, Cap 27. Before the break, we looked at hiring and statutory minimums, and now we're moving on to talk a bit about leave. Before I go to Mr. Kati, who's going to share that with us, I just want to let you know, if you're watching and you want to actually follow along with the Labor Code with us, you can go to www.laws.gov.ag and you can find all of Antigua's laws. Go to L, it's alphabetical, and you can search for the labor code and follow along with us. Sorry, A. Antigua and Barbuda labor code. So you can follow along, that's www.laws.gov.ag. Now, Mr. Kazi, before we were talking a bit about the statutory minimums, now we want to talk a bit about leave. That also has some statutory minimums involved. Could you tell us a bit about the leave that employees are entitled to and what the labor code sets out for them?
Very good. And so let me put a quick extension on something Mr. Kenji spoke to, which is the sick leave entitlement. Let me start there. Now, there is a conflict between the Antigua and Barbuda Labor Code and the Social Security regulations regarding this 12-day sick days, yeah? Now, I believe from my years of experience and reading both legislation, or the legislation and the regulation of Social Security, that there is a conflict, and it was really intended for those 12 days to have been uncertified days. I believe the legislators or the drafters intended that. And so, if you notice, if you look at the Social Security legislation, they do not pay for the first 2 or 3 days. Am I correct? Right. So it is my thinking and my understanding that the reason for that is that the 12 days when you call in, there was a call-in days that you would get paid for, and then when you have a sick leave certificate now, the Social Security would take care of that after the first 2-3 days have expired, then you get a percentage. We have recognized, or many of us in the field have recognized, that there is that conflict, but we have not moved to fix it. So the way we do it, the 12 days is combined, whether certified or uncertified. And so we follow the law, the labor code, that says for the first 12 days of any 12 consecutive months, the employee is entitled to be paid on occasions of genuine illness. And so that is the key word. But we always say it is between God and the individual who would be able to say if you're sick or you're not sick. But we know there's a problem as well of sick leave being abused by many employees. It's a privilege that was fought for. Persons died, blood and sweat, tears. And so the new generation sees it as a privilege, a right that came along just without any challenge at all. And there is also a development where employees are calling in to say that they are unable. And I want to address that. That is very critical in this leave privileges that we're speaking to. There is nothing that gives an employee the right to call his employer to say, I'm unable to come to work, and leave it there. You must, and I say must with all capital letters, you must give your employer a good and sufficient reason for why you are unable to come to work. When you're not able to come to work, you are in breach of your employment contract. Just as if the employer did not pay you for a day, they breach your contract. So it's 8 hours of work for 8 hours of pay for 5 days a week or 6 days a week, as the case is. And so on any occasion you're not able to come to work, you are in breach of your employment contract. So you must say to the person on the other side of the contract, I had a good reason for breaching the contract on that day, and so they will forgive that breach and the employment relationship continues. You must tell your employer why you are not able to come to work. The only occasion you have the right to say that you don't have to tell your employer is public holiday. Nobody have a work on a public holiday, but it is out of courtesy to the relationship, you should let your employer know in advance that I am not going to show up, may go Fort James, or may go Fries, or may go Long Bay, may go enjoy myself on this public holiday. Okay, you must call, right, you must call, but you don't have to give a good reason. You just say you're not coming to work because it's a public holiday. No. You see? And so that is the only day where you have a right to call and say, I'm unable, and out of courtesy, you say, listen, may go up on the beach, may enjoy myself with my family. So we need to stamp that out. It started at a particular security company of which I was consultant for a number of years. The persons come from elsewhere, come to Antigua, and then it spread like wildfire. It is not permissible, it is not acceptable
your employer must be in a position to determine if you have good and sufficient reason to breach that contract. All right? So we've addressed the issue of sick leave, and I've given that explanation. Now, Mr. Kentish did speak about public holiday. And public holiday is one of those requirements of the law. And if you work, or if you are scheduled to work, you are to be paid time and a half in addition to normal hours. So in other words, if you work an 8-hour day, 8 and 8 is 16, and half of 8 is 4. So 8 plus 8 plus 4 give you 20 hours. So on a public holiday when you work, you must see 20 hours, and if your rate is $10 an hour, that is $10 times 20 gives you $200 for that day. Am I getting the maths right? You're not too good at the maths. Right, so we want employees to know that that is how you calculate your public holiday pay. Now, some employers do it this way. 6.5 dozen is the same thing. Some employers give you 40 hours regular, and then you see a time and a half. It works out to be the same thing, because that one time is in the 40 regular, and then the time and a half is added. Some employers say 32 regular, and then 8 at 2.5 times is 20. But the math works out to be exactly the same thing, yeah? So that is the requirement of the law. Now, if you work by good industrial relation practices, because that is also important, very critical, just as important as our written laws, there's something that is called good industrial relation practices. So while the law does not address the issue of overtime on a public holiday, the practice is that if you are required to work overtime on a public holiday, the rate triples after 8 hours. That is as a result of good industrial relation practices, which would be supported right up to the level of the Privy Council. So if your employer have you working 12 hours on a public holiday and only pay you 2.5 times and not recognizing overtime kicks in after 8, the Privy Council will tell them you have to pay them for that based on good industrial relation practices. On your rest day, your day of rest, is not overtime, because overtime say it is hours work after completing your 8-hour shift. That is overtime. Now on your rest day, it can't be overtime because you're working 8 hours. And so the good industrial relation practice is that an employee is entitled to double time for work done on a rest day, not time and a half, because it is not overtime. The law doesn't define it, so it is left to the court. Where the law is silent, it is left for the court to interpret the law and what is absent and fill in the blank. So on a day off that you're scheduled to be off, but the employer calls you out to work, you get double time for every hour and triple time thereafter. Good industrial relation practice, which is just as binding as written law. So let us be aware of that. We spoke about vacation, and I want to again put an extension on what the Deputy Labor Commissioner said. The law sets a statutory minimum of at least a day per month. Now I'm working for 10 years someplace, and my employer decides that they're going to pay me the statutory minimum. The statutory minimum for 10 years, 12 years. No. Good industrial relation practices, which is just as binding as written law, demands that my employer do what? Act reasonably, having recognized that my equity in the business is increasing, the business is being profitable. It is for the employer to consider a progressive vacation scale consummate with my years of service. So it is not fair, it is not reasonable, it's not equitable for you to have me working 10, 20 years and give me the statutory minimum. So if you go to court, if you take a claim to the industrial court, for example, the court has that right, because where the law sets statutory minimums, the industrial court of Antigua and Barbuda can raise it over and above if there's a just cause to do so. And in those cases, I've taken several of those cases to the industrial court, and they have agreed with me and have given vacation over and above the statutory minimum. Employers must act fair to their employees. And moving on, talking about further leave, sick leave we've addressed. The law also talks about, we just spoke about vacation pay. Maternity leave, Mr. Kentish has already addressed. 14 weeks. Now, there are some employees who are, because you say you have to complete a year in the employment in order to qualify for maternity leave. Right. 1 year you have to be working in the job. And I shouldn't say for maternity leave, I should say for paid maternity leave, because you must get the time. The issue that we're addressing is pay. So you have to complete a year in order to qualify to get pay for the 14 weeks of leave. There's also an issue where there are some employees who think that they and they alone have the right to determine working right up to the last day before they go, or the estimated date that the doctor gives for confinement. Now, they may be struggling on the job, and I've had to deal with a couple of matters like this, having a bad pregnancy, missing many days from work, sick, I'm struggling, foot swollen, going to the restroom on many occasions because they want that extra time with the child, yeah? But it is presenting a problem and a risk to themselves, the lives of the child, and a liability for the employer, right? So an employer is in a position to say, hey, what we're seeing now, go to your doctor and submit. And the practice has been 6 weeks before that estimated confinement date, you ought to submit to your employer that maternity leave certificate. Now, if you desire to work up as close as possible to that date, you ought to have a conversation with your employer, and the employer can assess the situation as you go along and may very well agree to allow you to work as close as possible. But the employer must have a say in saying, no, based on your current conditions as we see them, we are not in a position to agree to allow you to work up to that date. And it is not your right and the right of your doctor alone to determine that. The doctor is not on the job and seeing, and you're not telling the doctor the truth of what you're seeing. So it is important that that discussion be engaged. Paternity leave is not in the labor code currently.
That's our last one we'll talk about.
It is a developing practice, and there are some concerns. So you wish for me to address, or at a later date? I can go ahead? Yes. Okay. So paternity leave, we now recognize that fathers must play an equal role as mothers do. And historically, we know the man operates like the rules of the jungle, and so you impregnate a woman and you run somewhere else and you impregnate somebody else. And so you do not stay around to take care of that family. The nucleus be a part of that nucleus family. So there is this push to encourage fathers to play their role as they should, those vagabond men out there. And so we are developing, I said those, they're the exception. And certainly I can speak to the fact that, I have 2 boys and I've been there, one's 36 and one is 26. I've been there I've seen them both born, yeah? And there are many fathers, there are many good fathers, and of course no disrespect to them. We're talking about the vagabond ones. And so now we're trying to encourage them to get to that stage where they assist the mother of the child during the stage of pregnancy. We also recognize that there's a culture that in many instances, by the time the child is ready to be born, father and mother are separated, particularly if they're not married or they do not live together. So I have insisted, because I do have employer clients who raise concerns with me about giving the male employee time off and he's not with the mother. The purpose of paternity leave is for the father to assist the mother during those times when she's having difficulty, assist in going to the doctor, when the child is born, give her opportunity to have some sleep, and play a father role. But there are many employees out there, male employees, who get the time off and use it to go to a fete and to Lyme and so. So we have to, the unions are encouraged to look at this thing seriously and not just do a carte blanche. And I have been insisting that there's a process in place where, one, preferably I want to start with married fathers who are living with their wives and having children, persons who are cohabiting, who live together. You have no choice. You have to wake up when the child cries and so on, so on, so. You have to be a part of the mother's life. On any other occasion, and you're not with the mother, and you're saying you're playing a role, let the mother give you a letter to take to your employer for say that you are being a part of the child life and you're participating in the childbirth and so, and you qualify for get pay. The unions don't like to hear that. I don't know why, But if we do not do things like that, streamline the whole process, there is going to continue to be that abuse. And I'm hoping the labor code, when it gets to that point shortly of speaking to paternity leave, that there will be some conditions that are put in place to ensure that paternity leave is used for the purpose for which it is genuinely intended.
Very important point.
Yes.
Now we're going to take another quick break. And when we get back, we're going to be going to our rapid fire round, which is when we will be reacting in real time to some of the comments, if any, that you would have been leaving on our Facebook live stream. So stay with us. We're going to take a very quick break, and then we'll be right back to Justice. Know your rights and know your power.
I thought this was safe until Willie the Worthless couldn't put me back together. But now my unattached hands will show you how easy and secure it is to file a medical claim on the CG United online portal. Get back here. Oh, my legs. What magic school did you go to? Ta-da!
We can't reverse magic tricks gone wrong, but we can make it easy to file a medical claim on the online portal. CG United. Good like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sessions with Corinne is back, unpacking the issues affecting our everyday lives in Antigua and Barbuda. I am your host, Corinne Norton, author, counselor, and consultant. Remember, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions and your feedback. Sessions with Corinne, every Tuesday at 8 p.m., exclusively on ABS TV and online. See you there.
Good evening, my friends. Hello, friends. Good evening, my friends. Welcome to Cooking Magic. Onion, sweet pepper, green pepper.
Coming to you from the heart of the home, the kitchen. Fridays at 6:30 p.m. on ABS.
My mushroom.
We cooking magic. We cooking magic, yeah.
Cooking Magic, brought to you by Epicurean Fine Foods and Pharmacy.
Just
Welcome back to Justice. If you're just joining us, we're about to get into our rapid fire segment. It's been very lively this evening. We have a number of comments, and I'm going to be giving our studio guests, Commissioner Kentish and Mr. Kati, some real-world scenarios and some real questions that you as viewers have been commenting on our Facebook stream. And they are going to react. They're going to answer the questions. They're going to tell me if there's any rights violated. We're going to be dealing with it. So right off the bat, we have our first query. What key details should every worker look for in a contract before accepting a job? If someone starts working and they never receive anything in writing, is that a red flag, and what should they do?
So let me take the second part first.
Sure.
Your letter of employment, that letter that is mentioned in C5.1, is the foundation of the relationship. And if when you start that employee relationship, you did not receive that letter, it means that the relationship has started badly. And in 99% of the cases, it's going to end badly. So it's a red flag. A dark red flag.
Very burgundy.
Right? So, and those things that, that you should look for are what Mr. Kati mentioned when he, so your duties and responsibilities, your pay, and how you calculate the pay, your leave privileges, probation period, if any, and that phrase is important because, as was stated before, probation is not automatic. Also have, if there's a union in place, that you're informed that there's a union in place. If you're a member, well, you can present to us the necessary documents. We will deduct your union dues and pay it over to the union If you're not a member of the union, when we negotiate, you will have to pay a negotiation fee. So those are the basic things that you look for. Oh, important too is if your contract is other than indefinite. So if you're hired for a fixed term period, but remember, there is a restriction on the granting of fixed term contracts. So only managers, consultants, and the list of professionals fixed term contract ought to be given to. And then there's some other restriction as to issuing fixed term short term contracts, and in aggregate amounts to 12 months. And also, if the job is permanent in nature, then a fixed term contract ought not to be issued.
And we should say the job functions and not the title, because the employers were thinking that if I say that this person, I only want them for 3 months, but they're doing jobs of a permanent employee, let's say in a hotel, they're the bartender. And so you're suggesting that they're on a fixed term contract being a bartender, and so that is a legitimate contract. Bartending work in a hotel is permanent in nature, right? So you can't say I only need a bartender for 3 months, so the position falls under a fixed term contract. So that is an essential point to make.
You may give that job title, that a certain job title, but when you look at the functions
as
the
well.
function points back to this particular
that it's
job.
permanent in nature. Yes.
We've got another very quick one because we're wrapping up soon. They ask, can an employer substitute one kind of leave for another? Can sick leave be taken out of my vacation leave without my agreement?
Short answer, no.
All right, quick one.
Sick leave is sick leave. Vacation leave is vacation leave. But
it's a rapid fire round. Short answer.
Yes,
no
short
problem.
answer.
That's great. We have another question, another reaction. This person asks, just to be clear, if it's a public holiday, does a worker have the right not to work?
Correct, without question.
Quick answer.
But you should inform your employer that you're not coming so that they can make arrangement to substitute someone else.
to have the job covered.
Right, and then one final one we're going to take. We have a question about payment of overtime and whether that can be substituted by days. Seems to be a very
Employers, there's some employers by practice talk about giving lieu days in exchange for public holidays. But what they do is that instead of giving, so I work on a public holiday, which is 2.5 times, which is 20 hours, but then I give you 1 day as the equivalent, which is 8 hours. So if you're going to give me in lieu, you have to give me 2.5 days at home with pay in order to match one public holiday.
But in a matter that the industrial court determined, you cannot substitute. It said you cannot substitute days in lieu for public holiday and overtime. That matter concerned the immigration officers.
Well, I think again, I think the issue was it wasn't an equal bargaining, right? So I differ from Mr. Kentish on his interpretation of what the court was saying. My understanding is 2.5 times on a public holiday does not equate to 1 day. Because as I said, if you pay me the equivalent of a public holiday, then I'm getting the equivalent of the public holiday. So we may have to have that discussion between us and look at the court decision and what it says to see whether or not one or the other opinion would be correct.
And so my answer is to take that matter to the Labor Department.
Yes.
Again, nothing that we say on this show is legal advice. We always recommend that you would seek representation and that you would take your queries to the appropriate space, and that would be the Labor Department, so that Mr. Kentish can assist you. Now, we have gone through all of the comments that we're able to take at this time. We're going to throw 2 quick scenarios at these gentlemen, and then we're going to be wrapping up. So scenario 1, if we have a worker who was hired with normal hours being 8 to 4, but his employer asks him to stay until 7, several times a week. He's only getting his regular hourly wage for those additional hours. He's never gotten any additional overtime pay. Fast reaction. What are his entitlements in that scenario? What should he do?
He's entitled to overtime pay, or as the code says, premium pay, for the additional hours that he works on a daily basis.
Simple and quick and to the point.
But very quickly, the first thing I flagged, 8 to 4 represents 8 hours. You are to work 8 hours for your employer and 1 hour for you if you get an hour lunch, so it should be 9 hours. The workday should consist of 9 hours. So 8 hours for your employer and 1 hour for you. So this would reduce to 7 p.m. It means that he's looking at 2 hours overtime.
All right.
That can work.
That can work. A quick one, scenario 2, we have an office clerk, 2 years of service at the company. She informs her boss she's pregnant at the 4-month mark of the pregnancy. Shortly after that, she's given 1 week's notice and she's terminated for poor performance. But she's had no prior warnings, no performance reviews documented. We didn't get to touch too much on termination or at all this evening, but she has a feeling that the employer did it because of her pregnancy. What can she do in a scenario like that?
Well,
does she have any recourse?
Of course. She goes to a union or to an attorney at law or to the Labor Department, a person like myself, and say, I believe I have been unfairly dismissed. And certainly this would be proven to be so because the employer must have a factual basis for coming to a decision to dismiss, and that reason must be lawful and proper. Now, this is a case that would qualify, once she wins, for what you call exemplary damages, intended to punish the employer for such a grievous and egregious act.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. That's all that we have time for this evening. Thank you both for sharing your expertise with us. We are at the end of our broadcast. To anybody that is watching right now, to those of you who would have commented on our Facebook streams, thank you so much for your engagement. We know that this was a very hot topic and many of you were very interested. To everybody watching at home, we have had an incredible conversation tonight. I'm going to go back to these gentlemen very quickly for a quick reaction. 30 seconds each of you. Is there anything in closing that you want to mention to the viewers at home? Mr. Kentish.
I would like to say to employers, make certain that at the start of the relationship, you issue to that person who you are employing that letter of employment. It is very important that you do so. Because as I said previously, the letter of employment is the foundation of the employer-employee relationship. And if you have a bad foundation, the structure is not going to stand. And so this relationship will never last.
All right, and Mr.
And for
Carty?
me, this is the employment Bible here in Antigua and Barbuda. This is about 33 years old. But any employer can have or purchase a copy of this document at the government printery for only $150. So, no, I'm talking about my copy. It's a bit tattered, and so I'm talking about my copy, not the law itself. And so you go to the printery and purchase a copy of this, and this is the employment Bible, and you follow it. If you need assistance interpreting it, there's the Labor Department, there are attorneys at law, and there are persons like myself who are practitioners in the field who will guide you. And as long as you let this be your guide, you will never get it wrong. Have a great night, everybody.
Very important
Employers
advice
also.
from both of these gentlemen. Thank you for those remarks. And with that, we're at the end of our program. To anyone watching right now and to those who would have commented on our stream and sent in questions, thank you. Your participation is what makes justice a real conversation about knowing your rights and knowing your power. I just want to give another quick shout out to the company that would have styled me this evening. Everyone, make sure to check out Size and Style Boutique. If you enjoy or like the look of my dress this evening, you can find them at Size and Style 268. And if you enjoyed tonight's episode and you want more of this, comment the next legal topic that you want to hear about. Next week, we might tackle it, or you can email your questions and suggestions to ABS. I'd also like to thank the Pink Mongoose for these lovely flowers, this lovely floral arrangement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this evening. It has been Justice, Know Your Rights, and Know Your Power. We can't wait to welcome you back next week. Good evening.
Know your rights, know your power. Smart talk, real facts. This is your hour. We make it clear, we keep the blame. Virginia Saint Roman, we break the law, down no game. Know your rights, know your power. Justice.